Joanns from Rowan University, currently taking the History of Camden course.
And I'm Brittany Woll from Rowan University.
And we're going to interview Joann Held. So how, if at all, did your childhood prepare you for the role that you have now? Were there any experiences in your life prior to the role that you're in that made you want to be there?
My childhood.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because my childhood is very different from this. I grew up in a small community in northern Illinois, not anything like a city, and so coming to Camden to do work was a little bit jarring for me because urban life is so different. So actually part of it was the work I've done here is to try and distinguish what's normal urban life and what really isn't normal and is more of an environmental justice issue. I did grow up in a small community, though, where people care about each other and take care of each other. And I think that's something I've seen here in Waterfront South, that people, they know what's happening with their neighbors. And I think I could understand that part of what's going on here. And it helped me to sort of jump right in and start doing some work here.
Okay, we saw that you had a bachelor's degree in meteorology and then a master's in air pollution control. How did the two of those have a link at all?
Well, I got my degree in meteorology because I wanted, partly because I really wanted to go to college, and so I had to pick something that needed college requirements. So, and I loved weather, but my first job out of college with my bachelor's degree was in an oceanography laboratory, and which was interesting, but I really couldn't advance much with just a bachelor's degree. I decided I needed a master's degree, and I had a book called Special Topics in Meteorology, something like that. And I started paging through the book, and it had a section on agricultural meteorology and forensic meteorology and all different kinds of meteorology. And each chapter I'd read the first paragraph and go on to the next chapter. I got to the air pollution meteorology chapter and I read the whole thing. I knew that it just resonated with me, that was really where I could apply what I knew and do something useful. So.
We saw that you did the climate control workshops at Hopewell Valley, and we were just wondering what your biggest takeaway from that was.
The climate control workshops. I'm not sure exactly what you have in mind there, but I am on the Hopewell Valley Green Team. Is that the relationship there?
Did you guys do some kind of workshop there?
We have been as part of the Green Team, as part of this bigger, and you might be getting to this later, the Sustainable Jersey program. And I think Camden now finally has a Sustainable Jersey Green Team as well. And climate change is one of the aspects, I guess, of why we need to live more sustainably. But I don't remember the workshop, or maybe we called it something else locally, so I'm not sure exactly where you're getting to. Sorry.
How did you become interested in working in Camden specifically?
We were I was working for the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection in the air quality control program, and we were thinking a little bit about environmental justice issues, but not very much. And then the U.S. EPA offered grants to state agencies to actually do environmental justice type of programs, the cumulative air risk assessment inventory, something like that, initiatives. And someone in our department decided we should apply for this grant. And they told me, write a grant proposal. And then they told me, make it in Camden. And so I said, all right, I wrote a proposal, and what I tend to do when I write a proposal is vastly underestimate how much it's going to cost to do the work, and so they tend to get approved because I come in with such a low number, and that was approved. And the proposal was to actually come down to this neighborhood in environment in Waterfront South specifically, and look at some of the air pollution problems that they had here and do a comprehensive look at them. Up until that point, people were just sort of saying, well, I don't like this source, so that must be the source of all my problems, or I don't like this source, or here's a problem, that must be it. And I want to look at it more comprehensively in cumulative aspects. And so the grant was approved, and we started to come down here to do that cumulative impact assessment.
So with the work that you did with NJDEP, what kinds of air pollutions, if any, did you find here in Camden, Waterfront South?
Well, you know, when we came in, what we were expecting to find was a lot of what we call air toxics. We sort of were dividing the universe of air pollutants into two categories. One was the criteria pollutants, which were 6 pollutants that the US EPA has set ambient air quality standards for. And then air toxics is everything else. So it would be things like arsenic and benzene and dioxin. All those things are the air toxics. And whenever we talk to people about urban air pollution, they would say, oh, well, the problem in these cities is that you have all these air toxic sources. And that's what we were expecting to see. At the end of our study, we did find a few little spots where the air toxics were higher than we'd like to see. But overall, the biggest problem seemed to be particulate pollution. There are particulate sources all over the place, and they were the big cumulative source of pollution here. You had the obvious ones from the industries that were grinding things and manufacturing things, a lot of sand blasting and that sort of thing. Then you have all the, a lot of places that were just, people would call them, they like to think of themselves as recycling. They're really like dumps where people bring in garbage and then try and find ways to get it reused. And then there are all the vacant lots with a lot of windblown dust. There are piles all over the place. And so when we modeled all of that, particulate pollution was the biggest problem. It was bigger than we had seen in anything we had done recently. And it really got the attention of the DEP management when they saw our study results. So.
Okay, the toxins and everything that you were just talking about, how are they hazardous to the people living in the community?
Well, each of the air toxics, they have a multitude of issues. One of them, for example, was lead. There was a facility that was taking in old metal pipes and sandblasting them to clean them up so they could be reused. And they're sandblasting outdoors. The pipes had a lot of lead paint on them, so lead was being emitted into the air. Lead has a number of health effects, but the most serious one is for young children when they're exposed at certain developmental periods in their life. They can have sort of brain issues, learning issues. So that lead is really important from that perspective. So that was the lead issue. There were a few, I think there were 1 or 2 hot spots for benzene, and benzene can cause some short-term problems. In the long term, it's linked to leukemia. And then there are some that are linked, that we saw that were linked to lung cancer and other kinds of cancer. And there was a tiny little dioxin hot spot, and that's linked to cancer and some other issues. A lot of the air toxic issues are cancer issues, but there's also things like kidney failure. There are short-term respiratory problems, and then there's the developmental effects like the lead. So you have a big range of health issues when you talk about the air toxics.
What does your research show that fixing the air pollution in Camden can do for the community?
Well, I think one of the health effects that the people in Camden were especially interested in was asthma. A lot of people had asthma, or the children especially, there are a lot of asthma cases. Exposure to particulate matter has been shown to be related to triggering asthma events, for example. And so being exposed to less particulate could moderate some of the asthma conditions. That was one thing. Another issue that I actually haven't addressed yet, and because we never think of it as a traditional pollutant, is odors. Odors were a big issue here, and I was sniffing as I came into the neighborhood today to see how they're doing, and there's still issues here. You probably noticed as well as you came in. The odor issues came from, well, they mostly were concerned about the sewage treatment plant, but there's also the licorice plant that grinds licorice root and then makes a big composting pile. That has lots of odors associated with it. And then there are the diesel trucks, and diesel exhaust has an odor. So people who were living here were exposed to all these odors. The odors include some constituents like hydrogen sulfide that have their own direct health effects, usually related to respiratory effects. But also the stress of living with all those odors is really detrimental to people's health. And also the not being able to get out and exercise. For example, when the odors are really bad, they kind of hid indoors. So they weren't, and the children weren't outside, the people weren't outside. That's detrimental to your health, just not getting the exercise. And also it's hard on a community not to be able to be outside and relate to each other. So there were kind of non-quantifiable health effects that were in the mix. When we got to the end of our report, we said, well, we quantified these things using models, so it's not direct relationship, but we have these issues related to pollutants, and then there are all the things we couldn't quantify, and part of it is the stress from odors, and so that was a big part of the puzzle, I think. And I can't remember exactly what your question was now. I hope I answered it.
We watched the Poets of Poverty film in class, and Father Doyle talked about Camden being a dumping ground because of the sewage and of the other things you talked about. Do you agree with that characterization?
Yes, that happens. I can see it happening here. I know Waterfront South the best, but I know it probably happens in other parts of Camden as well. And I've seen it happen in other poor urban areas. The most well-known one in New Jersey is probably the Ironbound District in Newark. Same kind of things happening there, that the people don't have the political capital sometimes to fight those kinds of dumps. And you have a lot of vacant land, and so it's really easy to bring those things in. We did a little project. We got another grant, and part of that project was to actually map the dump sites in Waterfront South. I had a student, and we drove up and down every street in Waterfront South, and wherever we saw piles of things, we got the address and documented it. And so we found, well, scrap yards that are here officially, like Camden Iron and Metal, where they take in a lot of metal and they shred it and then sell it. Those are really big, but there's a pallet plant where they recycle pallets. And then there's the, let's see, there are places where there's just piles of scrap that did not seem to even be attended by anyone. There were, well, and then of course there is the county sewage treatment plant, so not, the whole county sends its sewage here, and you have the county municipal waste combustor, so you have all that going on. And I think down near the municipal waste combustor, there's a big empty lot, just enormous, right across from the port, and there are always mysterious piles there as well, coming and going. It's never clear what those were. So I saw one of them as I came in today, though, that's covered now. It was really a great big tarp and tires holding it in place, and that was nice to see. But yeah, we counted about probably about 50. In this 1 square mile, we counted about 50 places that had some kind of scrap just deposited there.
So we've been discussing environmental justice, more specifically in Camden, but we just want to know how your experience helped shape your opinions on environmental justice and injustices.
That's interesting. I was thinking about that earlier today because before I started doing the project here in Waterfront South, I hadn't really thought about it very much. I mean, I'd heard people talk about it in more of a theoretical way, and in fact, there was a lawsuit brought by some of the local citizens against the cement plant, which was called St. Lawrence Cement at the time. It's got another name now. And my group at the DEP did dispersion modeling and risk assessment. So if a source came in for a permit and it was large enough, it would come to us and we would make sure that we looked to see where the plume was going, where the pollutants would go, and was it safe. And we had done that, and we'd actually gone over beyond what we would normally do for that facility to make sure it was safe, and everything we did showed it was safe. Well, they still had a lawsuit, and then there was the deposition section of the lawsuit where they bring in people who know something about the project, and they ask you questions they ask you the same questions over and over and over again for hours, I guess hoping you'll change your mind. But they came in, one of the questions that I was asked beyond, just the basic steps was, well, didn't you know that this was a low-income area? Didn't you know that this is a minority area? And it had never occurred to me to even look at demographics when I was doing that kind of work. And I actually felt pretty bad about it. I almost wanted to apologize to the lawyers, but you don't do that in that kind of deposition. But it just had not occurred to me that this was an area that was really already vulnerable, and that you might want to do more in an area that's vulnerable. And the work that I've done since then, I've started to get more in tune to that sort of, that part of the puzzle that's really important, that we need to be paying more attention to. Yeah, so that's something I've learned a lot about. And now when I look at a neighborhood, I can say, oh, well, we should be concerned about this, this, and this, not just that obvious stack there.
Okay, and also we've talked about environmental discrimination in our class, how it's a crucial issue going on. Do you witness that in Camden?
Well, it's usually not right at the surface where you can see it. It's hard, but there are some, one of the things I actually have been talking to people about too is trying to find the tools that will identify the environmental justice communities and those kinds of discriminations, quantify it so that it becomes more visible. When it's just a behavior, it's really hard to quantify a behavior. But when you have the numbers there, you can get people to see it. And so there are a few models out there now that people are using to try and accumulate information about all the pollution sources in a neighborhood, and then at the same time accumulate information about the socioeconomics, the minority status, and put those together and show how they are related. And the New Jersey DEP a number of years ago did something like that, and they have this bar chart that shows the amount of pollution versus the racial mix, or the percent minority. And so percent minorities low, pollution sources low. Percent minority high, pollution sources high. It's a straight line practically. When you see that, you go like, here's the evidence. Now you can actually, it's hard to dispute that. It's really hard to just say, and especially, to say I see a behavior. Also when I'm down here, it's, I come down I live about an hour away. And when I come down, I just see a tiny bit of what's happening here. I don't live here from day to day. I don't see all the, I talk to folks, but it's not the same as being close by and seeing the day-to-day interactions. So it's really hard for me to feel like I'm an authority on that. But I'd like to try and, but I guess one thing I see myself as being able to do is pull some numbers and show that to people who can be, those people who are won over by numbers. Other people are won over by anecdotal things or their own personal experience, but sometimes you just need to show somebody numbers and they go, oh, all right, I get it now. We're going to do something more. And that's when I feel like I've accomplished something.
Well, thank you so much for your time and your insight. It's very helpful.
Oh, you're welcome. It was fun to be able to talk about it.
Thank you.